We have today a very important point to discuss, waterborne diseases and its prevention. And there are two very distinguished persons available with us, Professor Rita Colwell, a very distinguished university professor at the University of Maryland and Johns Hopkins University, and also Professor Anwar from Maryland University. Welcome to our studio at Channel I.
Thank you.
Cholera was a very predominant disease in Bangladesh, and specifically during rainy season we had this disease, and it has virtually wiped out villages after villages. Maybe thousands of patients, especially young ones, they come, and also elderly. They come with diarrheal diseases for the treatment. I think there are incidences which indicates the resurgence of this particular problem in many areas of the world. In Haiti, in Africa, in some of the places in Middle East, these things are happening. Not only cholera, typhoid is also a major problem in Bangladesh, and the children as well as the elderly people are highly affected. There are also incidences of hepatitis A and hepatitis E, which is also a big problem. So we'd like to hear from you. How do you look at it, and how we can prevent it, and what are the things that we need to do, and what are the latest scientific observations from your research?
Well, first I'd like to point out that cholera remains a global disease. More than 1 billion cases occur every year now, with about 1.2 million deaths, as you pointed out, predominantly children and the elderly. It hits 50 countries, and what used to be restricted pretty much to India and Bangladesh, it's really now understood to be a global disease. So that's the first point. Yeah,
but are you sure that it's cholera, not necessarily other things like E-tech, and there are E. coli, or there could be many other things, rotavirus and things like that. But why you said cholera?
It's a very good point, because in fact some of the recent work that we're doing in analyzing the disease samples, clinical specimens, we're finding that it's between 4 and 10 pathogens in a patient, let's say in Calcutta, coming into the cholera hospital, which means that it's a really polymicrobial infection, and much more than we had suspected. So you're quite right. I think that number of 1 to 2 billion cases is diarrheal diseases, and they're waterborne. So that's a very good point.
Out of this, let's say 2 billion, you're talking about almost like 1 billion responsible, the disease is Vibrio cholera?
The symptoms of cholera: extreme diarrhea, dehydrating diarrhea and vomiting, and without replenishment of the fluid lost, then death ensues. Now, that's a good point, because I would say that specifically, if Vibrio cholerae toxigenic form of a given serotype occurs and can be detected, then that would be called cholera. Okay. But we're finding from the samples that we studied from victims in the Haitian cholera outbreak that 20% did not carry Vibrio cholerae 01, carried Eromonas or some other bacterium or virus that caused the diarrheal disease.
Yeah. Professor Anwar, so what do you think, that you are a scientist working in Maryland University, so what do you think that how can you handle this particular situation?
Well, when you mentioned about cholera, waterborne diseases and prevention, and also mentioned typhoid and the other, first prevention, safe drinking water for all waterborne diseases, not only bacterial, even parasitic disease. That's how cholera was eradicated from the Western world, Europe, and United States. So it is there, and it will be there. The organisms are waterborne, naturally occurring organisms. Our findings in Dr. Colwell's lab, our team, Dr. Cowell's team has shown that these organisms are always there. It's a matter of finding. Almost we can find anywhere these bacteria. Sometimes the concentration is so low, it is hard to find unless you concentrate large volume of water, and then we can find. So bacteria is there. Now, for prevention, you have to find different methods. It could be vaccine, first safe drinking water, then vaccine or any other preventable methods, whatever. So again, we have to find a prevention method because we cannot eradicate this disease.
Anwar has said, because it's important. Until about, I would say 1970 or 1980, the assumption was that cholera was transmitted only person to person. Right. It was because it was very difficult to isolate it between epidemics. What we found out was that the bacterium exists as part of the natural flora, the natural microbiology of the environment. It's in the aquatic system as a natural inhabitant associated with aquatic microscopic animals. So it's impossible to eradicate, as Anwar pointed out, because it's carrying out important natural functions, cycling carbon, some of fixing nitrogen, and carrying out metabolism of substrates, degrading it and recycling material. So it's part of the natural system.
Oh, so this is a very, very important finding, that it's not going to be somebody is infected somewhere and then it originates and going to go in different places. That's not the case. So it's part of our nature, and it could happen anytime, and only you need the triggering factor to be triggered. Yeah. Okay, there is another one issue. Let's say one thing that we are sure and agree with you, that in case of all the waterborne diseases, if we specify cholera is a big problem in Bangladesh, and in addition to other diarrheal diseases, it could happen from E. coli, from rotavirus, from or any other similar such bacteria. And then we also have typhoid.
Yes.
Which is a big issue, yes, because it's affecting many elderly people, and it could be fatal at times. And you could imagine that there is a tremendous amount of resistance coming up nowadays, and you find out typhoid, which is not sensitive to multiple antibiotics. So this is a big problem for us. The other issue, which is a very dangerous issue, which we are not looking at it at this moment, is hepatitis E, yes, infection, especially to pregnant mothers.
Yes.
If that happens, then it's a disaster. So in order to prevent or protect our population from all these diseases, cholera, other diarrheal diseases, typhoid, hepatitis A and hepatitis E, so we have, in order to give people protection from this, there is no alternative but to give them safe drinking water.
Absolutely.
So this is one criteria.
You can control at least 26 diseases.
Yeah. So you have to make sure, while we are making safe drinking water available, you have to parallelly make sure that we have something so that these diseases do not occur.
Exactly.
So we cannot ignore the possibility of bringing in a proper, good vaccine. But while discussing with you, we have a vaccine now. At least there are 2 different vaccines. And then also several other vaccines are being developed in several laboratories. Like in rotavirus or in flu vaccines, one single vaccine may not be good enough perennially. So you have to look into the strains, and then you have to identify how it is going to change, and you have to come up with a new vaccine. What is your opinion on this issue?
I look on the cholera vaccine as a very powerful, important tool to circle and contain cholera outbreak, but not as a universal protection, because to vaccinate everybody is A, impossible, and B, very expensive. And in addition, if you were able to do that, which I find very difficult because the best vaccine is probably 60 or 70% effective, if you are able to provide safe water, at least you are eliminating many of the diseases. And there's something else that we're also beginning to understand, and that is the assumption has been that a single agent causes the disease. But as we analyze clinical samples, stool samples from cholera patients, we find that it's anywhere from 4 to 10 other pathogens. So I think we have to use...
Is the same serotype, or let's say different serotype of Vibrio cholera you are talking
Well,
about?
it'll be other pathogens like Salmonella,
Yeah.
Shigella, rotavirus,
Yeah.
Giardia, Cryptosporidium,
Yeah.
which are parasites.
Yeah.
So it's a melange of pathogens. You see, as microbiologists, for 100 years, we've operated on what are known to us as Koch's postulates. Robert Koch, a German microbiologist, about 1890, showed that he could prove the germ theory of disease by isolating from an infected person an agent and then reinfect using animals and be able to prove. And so we assume that it's rotavirus or cholera, but we're now beginning, because we have better tools with DNA sequencing and RNA sequencing, to show that it's really a mixture of viruses and bacteria and parasites.
And parasites, yes, that's amazing. Yeah. Now coming back to Professor Anwar, then what do you think about the water issue? How can we look into this and make sure that more and more segment of our population have access to safe water?
The idea of providing safe drinking water to everyone, we should start thinking how local safe drinking water can be available. There are different chemical treatment methods, closed circuit filtration method, and also I would like to mention the method we developed, a simple sari filtration for Bangladesh context. What we found, a sari cloth, cotton sari cloth, used sari cloth, which is not worn by people, take a piece of it, make 4 folds and filter water, pond water, that can remove 99% of the bacteria attached onto copypods and other particles. Cholera is a dose dependent, so we don't need sterile water as long as we can bring down the number, because we need a healthy volunteer study we did in the United States in Maryland. You need 1 million bacteria to show clinical symptom of cholera. For nutritionally malnourished person, maybe they require fewer organisms, but definitely 1,000 or 10,000 bacteria is not going to cause cholera. So if we filter, can remove 99% of the bacteria, most likely we will bring down below infectious dose. So we did a field trial in 45,000 people in Matlab about 10, 12 years ago.
Exactly.
And we found population that used sari filter had 48% reduction in cases compared to the group which carried out their normal method of practice of water use. So clearly, and it's a huge study, 3-year study, 45,000 people, when it did not cost a penny to these family members because they used old sari cloth. The sari cloth they were going to throw away. Just use it, filter it, fold it, filter water. Only thing, you have to train these people how to really make sure that unfiltered water doesn't enter into. So we found this, and then there was a question about it. Well, is it sustainable? Are the people going to use it? But we found, went back to the same population after 5 years, and we found people are still using it, but not necessarily exactly the way they should use, because there was no reinforcement. So somebody was using one-fold or two-fold.
Yeah.
So this education is so important. What we are thinking that if we can educate the whole population that they should use sari cloth and the way that should be used, I think it can have a
Tremendous
significant impact.
Yeah.
Then I want to add another one. Now that you have a good cholera vaccine, and it is not protecting 100%, right?
No.
So our thinking, we have been talking that if we combine sari filtration and vaccination, I think the prevention level, protection level can go significantly higher.
I'd like to add that this is exactly what we feel strongly about. I would like to add that we need to look at the clean water approach as a gradient. In other words, for the very, very poor, humble situation in the village, the sari filtration is very important. And then those who are fortunate enough to live in the Western countries or in a big city, the distributed water supply works. In between, it's possible, and I've been working with the Safe Water Network, which is an organization based in New York that provides these kiosks that produce filtered water, clean water, that's also chlorinated. But by the time you've done the filtration, you only have to chlorinate a small amount so people don't taste it. So we should have a range of treatment from the very poor who can use just sari cloth, and it costs, as Anwar pointed out, costs nothing, to cities where you pay for the safe water, and then something in between. And then there are a variety of other techniques, use of ceramic filters and so forth. If we could figure out how to employ according to the need, we could, I think, universalize.
Here, the important message is that educating people and transmitting the information across the board is very important.
Yes.
There are people who are just not being able to be communicated. I mean, they are isolated in some of the chores, very small islands and places where no drinking water is available, far away places. So they are not even going to the schools, and these are the things that are our problem.
Remote
areas.
Right.
Yeah. So we have to connect to each and everybody.
Yes.
We have to propagate this message that there is no frustration, we can handle it, but these are the ways we have to handle it.
Yes.
So there is no alternative to safe drinking water. We have to make sure, but these are the ways by which we can achieve that. And like you said, that we have options of ceramic filters or chlorinated water or kiosk, which gives multiple of purification steps, and then you get the drinking water. And also, where there is nothing, we do not lose hope. We can just fold 4 pieces of the cloth of a used sari and then filter it, and then we can have almost not so dangerous.
Right. I would add that we designed the study specifically for Vibrio cholera, the causative agent of cholera. When you fold the sari cloth 4 times, Anwar did the experiments, we looked under the electron microscope, and the pore size of the filter was about 20 micrometers. Now, the plankton that carry the cholera bacteria are about 200, 10 times bigger.
Yeah.
So they're clogged.
Yeah.
But the parasites are bigger too.
Yeah.
So we very likely reduced Cryptosporidium and Giardia and perhaps even viruses that are attached to some of these other particulates in animals.
Yeah.
But we hadn't designed the study, so we couldn't really publish any results to that effect because we didn't work on it. But again, the simple filtration may very well have been more effective than we had really anticipated.
The other issue I'd like to touch on that, let's say, if you talk about this year's temperatures across the board, across the world, you would see that all of a sudden, until December, there was hardly any low temperature in North Hemisphere. And also in Bangladesh, we have hardly seen the cold temperature that we are used to. And all of a sudden, there were storm and record minus temperatures and record amount of snowfalls ever in the history. So do you connect with that with some kind of climate change? And is there any other issue that we need take note regarding waterborne diseases on this change?
I think the evidence is very powerful that when you take into account predicted from the natural history, that the slope is upward, significantly upward. So yes, the storms are more frequent, they tend to be more intense, the temperature, it has gone up, and the greenhouse gases have been measured. So changes are taking place. Now, I think what's really critical is to understand what these changes will do to us as a human community. It's more than just more infectious disease. It's more than just sea level rise and flooding. It's societal disruption. It's a sociological, it's a cultural, devastating problem. Because take Bangladesh. Again, it's essentially the guinea pig of the situation, because 20% from the lowest estimate of sea level rise, 20% of the country is going to be underwater. Yeah. And that means migration. It means population pressures within the country and elsewhere. So we can't put a blind eye to this for much longer.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor, for coming to Channel I, this studio.
Thank you.
It was an honor for us to listen to you, such a distinguished professor, and you have been providing or doing the research and giving us the knowledge and how to solve these problems for so many years. And we are very, very honored for your presence to us, and also to Professor Anwar for being here with us and with your research findings and everything. And we are really honored for your presence. Dear viewers, you have heard from two very, very distinguished scientists in the area of waterborne diseases, especially diarrhea. We heard from them that we have a tremendous amount of potential and ways and means by which we can fight this out with the help of safe drinking water, with inexpensive vaccines, and many other things that we could do, both in the city area, also in remote village areas, so that we have nothing to worry about it. Only thing that we have to do is to communicate with each other and give them the right message. Thank you so much for listening.